Okay, we're on the record. Okay.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is posted in the local paper and also in the lobby of this building. We are being broadcast live on Channel 34 and streamed live on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that we have powers and procedures resembling a court of law. We are obligated to objectively determine facts and make conclusions from those facts, and any questions and comments should be limited to issues that the board may consider in legally making those types of decisions. We will expect decorum appropriate for a courtroom at all times. First up on our agenda is our roll call.
Chair Nguyen?
Here.
Vice Chair Brodock is excused. Mr. Schwartz is excused. Mr. Cook?
Here.
Councillor Schlager?
Here.
Ms. Willis? Here. Mr. Rooney?
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally?
Here.
Ms. Lockman? Here. Mr. Barr? And Mr. Gilmer is excused.
All right, we have minutes from September 9th.
I received comments from Ms. Lockman, which I believe were distributed to the whole board. Are there any other changes to the minutes?
If not, I move we approve.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I wasn't here.
Okay.
Okay, we have a resolution on Andrew Moldalvin, 1517 Hawthorne Place.
So I know the resolution was distributed to the board members, and Ms. Lockman made a couple of changes that were also distributed to the board.
I reviewed them, they're fine with me. I mean,
Okay.
I thought they were accurate.
Nothing very material, I don't think. A couple of things, but nothing that would cause concern, I don't think. And I
think
spoke
so.
with Art earlier, and he had no problem with them.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay, we do have an application that's listed on Section 5 on 264 Upper Mountain Avenue, and that has been postponed to our October 21st meeting. And that brings us to the application of the Montclair Art Museum.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good evening.
I'm Alan Tremulak. I'm appearing this evening as a pincher for my friend and colleague, Rick Skolnick, who unfortunately can't be here tonight due to death in the continue the application, which began at the August 26th meeting. And although I wasn't here, I was able to watch the entire video of the meeting, so I feel like I was here. And as you know, at the last meeting, this is application for site plan approval and one variance related to retaining wall height, which might technically be two variances depending upon the interpretation of the ordinance. At the first meeting, the applicant presented testimony from Laura Urbanelli, as you'll recall, the executive director of the museum. And you heard testimony from Paul Sionis, the project architect, and the gentleman sitting to my right, Paul Anderson, who testified as a professional engineer and professional planner. There were a few issues that arose during the course of Mr. Anderson's testimony and a request, I think, for some plan revisions. And as I think you know, plans have been revised. Revised plans were submitted to the board, I think, several weeks ago. So what I would like to do this evening is to recall Mr. Anderson to review the revised plans. And I'm assuming that before we do that, we probably need to mark some exhibits, Janice, from the recent submissions.
Yes. Give me a moment.
We're up to 16.
Can you pull that out? This file's getting too big. Yeah, A16 is where we are, so I would mark 3 exhibits. One, the September 10th letter from Paul Anderson is A16. And then A17 will be the revised sheets from Paul Anderson with a revision date of 9/9/2019. And A18 would be the revised plans from Paul Sionis with a revision date of 9/9/19. Oh, okay, and A20 will be my report to the board dated September 17th, 2019. Yeah, I'll mark that.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, you understand you're still under oath?
I understand.
And you testified at the August 26th meeting, and subsequent to that meeting, you prepared revised plans for this application, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And what I'd like you to review tonight is to review those plans for the board. And I understand that there's a PowerPoint presentation that you're going to use as part of your testimony.
There is, and I also have the handouts for the board.
So we'll mark that as A21, Janice, PowerPoint.
Actually, I think A19 should have been my report.
Yes.
So that'll be A20. Okay.
No blue cover on it.
Thank you.
All right, Paul, would you review your revised plans with the assistance of the PowerPoint?
It's with the PowerPoint, though. Excuse me, computer's locked. Well, while she's doing that, I had 3 topics that were of concern to the board at the last meeting. The first was the concern for child safety in walking up the walls and having a good method for keeping them off the walls. Second was some clarification as to the height of the walls and specifically where they started requiring variance relief and where they were conforming. And the third was with regard to the reflecting pool in the front of the site, to include that with a barrier-free surface all the way to the reflecting pool and not just to the curb line. So we have some revised slides. Here. All right, so this is a new rendering of the plaza, the main plaza. The building on the right and the stairwell that goes immediately up the side of the wall. With regard to the fence on top of the wall, we decided to put it on the top of the wall with exception of over the water wall, where we're running it behind the vegetation. So with the fence at the center of the wall, this will prevent children from walking up the wall. That was the concern that was expressed before. Now, this is a change somewhat on the stair side, because on the stairs previously, we had a 3-foot concrete wall above the stair treads, which we attached railings to, like a handrail to. So with this changes, we have a change in the design in that that wall only comes to the stair itself, and then we have the wire fencing railing system that we have on top of the wall running up the side of the stair. So you'll be able to see all the way through the stair. You'll be able to see somebody coming down the stairs. And then with that change, because there's no longer a 3-foot reveal on the wall at the bottom, we also did the same thing on the wall on the left and brought that from the top of the wall in the corner all the way down to grade, right near where it intersects the main walkway that comes into the project site. So those are some of the main changes.
How does the fence connect with the fences on the side connect, that are sitting on top of the wall? How do they connect with the fence that is running behind the shrubbery at the top of the border wall? Or do they connect?
It does. It has to step down. So it'll slope down. It'll be covered by some landscaping. But it is a transition from, it's probably a 1.5 feet above grade at that point, and it has to step down to the lower level. So there'll be a slope transition down.
Could you tell me what one is looking at that they're on the north side of Bloomfield Avenue? What are you seeing? Are you seeing a wall, or what are you seeing?
If you're on the north,
If you're on Bloomfield Avenue and you're looking at across to the art museum looking south,
if you're on Bloomfield Avenue, you really will not see.
you'll see a wall now. Right now
you will not see this wall.
No, it's on the other side.
So let me go
It's on
to,
South Mountain.
so
the front of it's on South Mountain, but
Right,
the
so-
side is on Bloomfield Avenue.
so if you look at this overall site plan,
Go to third.
Bloomfield Avenue is on the right side. If you're on Bloomfield Avenue, this wall is on the opposite side of the building.
So the building will be blocking the fence.
The building will
Building
be blocking
itself.
the fence from, yes, correct.
From Bloomfield Avenue.
Correct. You will potentially see a fence from South Mountain. However, it's a fence design that is somewhat invisible. It's a wire fence. That's another element of the design we have changed. Previously, we talked about horizontal wires, and we thought about that and thought that it could potentially be used as a ladder by children. And so we are going now with vertical wires, which will make it difficult for them to climb, and also will still provide the protection from them getting through.
Mr. Anderson, you call them wires, but is it more akin to cables?
They're a stainless steel cable, I believe.
Okay. When I think of wire, I think of something very
Yeah,
narrow and
thinner.
slender.
Yes,
It's a
it's-
cable.
It is a stainless steel cable, and it is relatively thin if you're looking at it from the yard, but it is thicker than wire. You're correct in that.
I have a question. It's not really clear to me from looking at your drawing that you just distributed exactly what the fence looks like on both sides before you get to the wall.
Okay.
You have the one on the right, the stairs, that's in this drawing is obscured by foliage and stuff that you've put in there, greenery. So you really can't see what the fence looks like. Is there something in the packet that you gave us that gives us a very clear picture of what this fence looks like, both on the south side and the north side? And actually, the wall as well.
Okay.
Because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really not getting it.
Okay, so I have in the packet 2 cross-sections of through the site. And if you look at the bold line in the plan view, that is where the cross-section is taken. I have some background behind it, just to get some context. But if you follow along this cross-section line, you can see that you come to the first retaining wall that is parallel with the parking lot, and it drops down to the plaza, and on top of that wall is a fence. and that fence is 3 feet, 8 inches tall. And you come across the plaza, which comes across this level area here, then we have an 18-inch seat wall, which is the lowest wall in the plaza.
But where is that visually shown in your, multi-page package? Is that it?
It's in that section, but it's also, we also have, in this view here, we have the walls clearly shown over here, not only around the perimeter, but also the seat wall, which has a curb to it, and then what we're calling a planter wall, which is behind that, which is 3 feet high.
Yeah, I get the walls. I don't get where the fence is situated on the walls, too. I'm interested in safety for children. You're,
Of course.
Attracting
Yes.
children to this. How are they going to be kept safe from falling off the wall? And particularly on the, if you're looking at it, the right side.
Okay, so it is shown there, but sometimes you can lose the line work. It gets too busy. But let me explain to you where it actually is.
No, show me in the packet, what page of your drawings?
I believe it might be in the architect's drawing.
Yeah, in the architect's drawings or whatever.
It's
We
on-
have a
it's on
big, huge
page-
packet here. Where is it?
It's on page L3 of the architect's drawing.
It makes sense if you tell me it's there, but it doesn't make sense if I look at this.
Yeah, it's ones that were submitted. These are the drawings that were submitted for this meeting. So this, what is the number? It's on A18.
A18.
You can look at-
Let 'em put it up.
You can look at SP3. It's probably
SP3?
the best plan. Sheet 10 of 13.
So there's a space between the foliage. So this space is open. This is the wall, right? So this space is open. You were saying that nobody can get in there. I found that.
There's no opening.
Is there a depiction of a cross-section of the fence to show the spacing of the cables and?
There is, in the architectural drawings, there is a cross-section on sheet L3 that shows the wall. The plaza walkway has the fence on top of it, and this number 3 and number 4 show the fence. The first one, number 3, shows how the fence is mounted to the top of the wall.
And that also shows the transition between the wall and the stairs, right?
Yes,
And how the fence is, as you go down the stairs, it's no longer on the wall, it's along the edge of the stairs? Is that?
that's correct,
Here.
which is technically part of the wall. I mean, the wall, stairs sitting on the wall.
L3.
So if you look on page L3, drawing 4.
Where it transitions from the rail to the So, So the fence will be continuous from all the way as a railing up the side of the stairs and connect to the fence that goes behind the landscaping, which is behind the water wall. And then we'll come back and turn 90 degrees and come down the top of the wall on the other side. There will not be gaps in it. The spacing between the wires is 4 inches, which is required by code, and they're vertical wires.
May I ask you a question on that? I think it's a great plan. It's really, it's totally together. It all works. Would you consider, and I know that there could be a variance, I'm not sure about the fence being on top of the wall as opposed to set back. It probably depends on what the height of the wall is, but that space between, if you look at the western side, there's a 4-foot approximate space between the fence and the wall. So anyone doing landscaping is going to be exposed to standing in that area and having an unprotected fall. That's the museum's risk. But I'm not sure if you thought about that. It certainly doesn't matter to me per se, but I thought since you have the fence on the wall on the south side, it would be safer, since it's still visible there, if it were on top of the wall. I know it may not look great in back of the water feature, but I just thought, if you just want to give it some consideration in terms of how that space is going to be maintained.
We will give that some consideration. I mean, the decision in that area was made because we wanted to eliminate the appearance from the bottom of the water wall. And
Got it.
just
I understand.
hide it.
Thank you. Is there a gate in there so that people can get into that easily rather than having to ladder in or climb it?
That would probably be on the architectural plans, but I don't
Okay.
know that we have it.
Okay.
It makes sense to have something like that also.
Thank you.
Another question, will your plantings, your initial plantings also be above the height of the fence?
Yes.
So at the top, the fence is how tall at the top of the wall?
When it's, the fence is 3 feet, 8 inches tall. If it's
And-
mounted to the top of the wall, it adds 3 feet, 8 inches to the height of the wall.
And the plantings, what do you expect your plantings will grow to be? How high?
I believe it was testified to that there were thujas that were going to be, and they could be 10 or 12 feet high at least over time, fairly short period of time.
But that 3 feet, 8 inch, did you say?
Yes, for the
Height
fence.
is going to be from the ground level at the top of the water wall.
Correct. It'll be from ground level. Where the fence is on, behind the water wall, it doesn't add to the height of the wall by your code. But it does add to your height on the side walls where it's coming up.
Did you choose to put the fence not on top of the water wall because of code or because of aesthetics?
Aesthetics.
Okay.
I mean, the only other thing that you could do would be to increase the height of the wall such that it goes above grade on the western side. It would be more expensive to do that, but you'd eliminate the fence. You'd have the look of the wall,
Right.
but not the fence. And that would create a safer area to do maintenance because the fence effectively would be, I'm sorry, the wall would act as a fence. But that's not, either way it would work.
Yes, it could work that way also. So if I could get back to where I was. With regard to the water feature in the front, we added the handicap accessible. We added a new ramp to the sidewalk in front from the main entrance. And we also added a flush curb all the way across and have a wide paved area where we'll have a barrier-free access to the water feature in the front circle. And then in terms of where we require variance relief, like I've been saying, the fence itself is 3 feet 8 inches tall. Your ordinance permits on a corner lot to be a wall to be 7 feet, but you count when the fence is on top of the wall. You count the height of the fence towards the wall height. So that means with the fence we've selected for this, we have 3 feet 4 inches. And so where that concrete wall is 3 feet 4 inches exposed or above, then we need a variance. So on this exhibit SP2 in the set, we have some orange numbers which indicate the wall height. The ones that are in the orange blocks are the ones that require variance. So about a third of the way down, all right, about a third of the way from the walkway up, you start seeing the, where it hits 3 feet 4 inches. And obviously, to the corner, it's 12 feet 2 inches high, plus the fence. And then as you go across the water wall, the fence is no longer in play. So until it gets to the seat wall on the other side, it maintains that 12 feet 12 inches. And then because the seat wall comes up 18 inches and the planting wall comes up 3, it's lesser, but still requires variance at the top of the stairs. And then about halfway down the stairs, it no longer needs the variance. One other location, in the lower part of the plaza, this wall here is 3 feet 3 inches, and then it's 3 feet 9 inches, I believe, or 3.9 feet. So that small portion of this wall needs a variance. In addition to the variance for the wall height, as was mentioned at the last meeting, there is a variance because you're supposed to step back the fence from the top of the wall. For design considerations, we wanted to keep it on top in some locations, and more for safety but for design, we're back on the water wall. But we do need relief from that section of the ordinance also. And then Janice has brought to my attention that the small wall that's here at the bottom, which is only about 2 feet high, we had placed a fence on top of that, thinking that the board would want to make that more secure and keep people from jumping off of that. It's approximately 5 feet high to the top of the fence now, and that would require relief because you're only allowed 4.5 feet in the front yard, because that pokes into the front yard of this. So we could do it either way. It doesn't require a fence by building code. So if the board is not inclined to grant that relief, we could eliminate the fence in this area. And if you're inclined, if you would prefer to have it, we could just give it in, but we would need relief for that.
What's the height of the retaining wall there again?
It varies, but it's about 2 feet.
Okay.
So those are the changes that we've made, hopefully to address the comments that the board had last time. If you look at, just revisit the planning proofs that I had provided last time, I think they remain very much the same. You have a retaining wall that is that needs variance relief, but is not very visible from anywhere off-site because the wall is down from view on South Mountain. It's also down from the south, and you see some of it from the east. So there is really not a lot of visibility to the wall. And the top portion of it is the fence, which is not very visible, and we have plantings associated with. So I see little, if any, perceived detriment caused by the wall itself. And the positive criteria, I think the general welfare is advanced by adding this outdoor barrier-free space for exhibits for everybody in the community. So I think those remain, and all of the C variances can be justified with that C2 proof.
I just have, I thought another thing that we brought up was recycling the water. Did you make any changes so that the water would be recycled to water the foliage, the grass and things?
We haven't added any recycling features. We do have dry wells associated with it, which we're going to help by recharging into the ground, but we haven't added anything where we're going to recycle it.
Okay.
Is that it, Mr. Tremula?
Yes, no further questions, I'm sorry.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public of this witness concerning his testimony this evening?
My name is Robert Rich. I'm an attorney, also a Montclair resident, and I represent Miriam Sampson. I know she's the person, she owns the property on St. Luke's Place, which is number 16, which is closest to the parking lot of the Art Museum. And I know she's spoken to several members of this board about drainage problems she was having with the museum. And I'm happy to report, since this is an engineering testimony, that we have resolved the entire dispute with the museum. And the museum has promised to satisfy us in every respect, and we would like to thank Ms. Urbanelli and Mr. Frasco for helping us with regard to all of our drainage problems, which I think will also help drainage through the parking lot. And therefore, I just want to put on the record that by the middle of the winter, everything should be resolved, because I know she has spoken to a number of people.
Well, I'm going to have a question. What's going on? I mean, what are the drainage? I mean, this is
No,
news.
there was a drainage problem
Okay.
going on to her property on the other side of the parking lot. But
Did it have to do with runoff from the museum?
Yes.
Which is her
Actually-
property? I don't think.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean-
let me
Okay.
explain. There's an adjoining neighbor who has an inlet that's under capacity in her driveway. It actually connects to the system that's in the Art Museum's parking lot.
Adjoining
And-
to the south of the museum
Correct,
property.
immediately to the south of where I believe,
On St. Luke's Place.
it's over in this area here.
Right over here.
Right, so what happens is the water during heavy storms comes in, it overflows past the neighbor's garage and it comes down to Mrs. Sampson's yard and washes things out and creates quite a problem. So we come up with some ideas of how to remedy that situation by collecting it better. There's also an issue with an old retaining wall that's falling down that needs to be replaced in kind. And there was concern that that was causing some drainage problems too, and some curbs that have been knocked out that let water through. So it's a maintenance issue that they've come to a concurrence as to what should be done.
So it's a maintenance issue and not part of the site plan application because it's outside the limits of disturbance?
That's correct. It's on the other side.
Okay,
of the
just, all
property.
right.
I just thought we would since my client has spoken to some members of the board, I thought that we would let you know that it's been all resolved. And the museum is very cooperative with us.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the public of this witness? Okay, thank you, Mr. Tremulak.
We have no further witnesses, Mr. Chairman. That completes the applicant's case.
All right. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on the application? Now's the time.
Hi, my name is Tom Besson, and I'm an artist. Some of you know me. And I put my comments in the form of a letter, which I wanted to submit to you, but I'm going to read the letter and just comment a little bit on the letter. Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm here to express my enthusiastic support for the Montclair Art Museum's plan to reconfigure and improve their outdoor spaces. As an artist who has worked in the Montclair Art Museum's collection, including a sculpture installed on the museum grounds, I have a special interest in this subject. As some of you may know, and I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my horn here, but I just trying to establish my knowledge. I lived and worked here in Montclair for 23 years, and I remain deeply connected to the community. And I have installed over 35 site-specific sculptural installations in public spaces around the country, including my work in Montclair at the Bay Street Station and Edgemont Park, in addition to the piece that I have on the grounds at the museum. I want to talk directly about how sculpture is made and shown, and sort of to talk a little bit about the considerations about why and when sculptures can be moved. And so this is a real oversimplification, but for the sake of some of the discussion that I know has taken place around moving sculptures at the museum, I think this is appropriate. There are basically two kinds of sculpture. One is sculptures that are made in the artist studio that are just sort of made in the studio and kind of looking for a home. And then they're taken out in the world and placed in different places. And then there are also sculptures that are made for specific sites. So they're designed to be in a specific context. And a good example of this site-specific sculpture would be, for example, the Spencer Finch lighting installation that's on the front of the museum that I hope you're familiar with. That piece was designed, for that specific space, and to move it, I think, would it could affect the integrity of the work because it was designed for that space. I mean, it could be moved, but it was really designed for that place. Also, the piece that I have one of the pieces I have at the Bay Street Station, also designed that it's a large screen that goes in between the two towers on the train platform. And that was designed with that space in mind. It fits in that space. It echoes the architecture of the station, and therefore it's not something that really should be moved. But other than the Spencer Finch pieces that are on the front of the museum, all of the other sculptures, including the Sunvow sculpture by Herman Atkins McNeil, and my sculpture that's on the grounds, these were not made for a site-specific location. So they don't lose anything by being moved. Their integrity is self-contained, so wherever they are, they're seen in a complete way. So speaking as an artist who has worked there, I expect that my work will be moved, and in fact, the slide's gone. The piece that I have at the museum on the grounds now is right where that waterfall is going to be, and so it's going to be moved, and I am totally fine with that because the museum is a dynamic place, and I want my work to be a part of this dynamic place. So, there's the waterfall, and so. As an artist, I feel honored to have my work in the museum's collection. I know that the piece will be conserved and taken care of and cared for. And I trust that the museum and the curators and the people who work at the museum, they will take good care of my work. And they will take good care of all of the work. And when they move the work, it's done in a thoughtful and considerate way. So I'm also really delighted that the museum is creating a dynamic sculpture garden outside of the space, outside of the doors of the museum. And I think that that this plan is going to activate that outdoor space, which will also work in favor of the sculptures that they have in their collection, and that for future outdoor sculptures that are coming in, I think it's very important what they're doing in terms of the landscaping. So that's my statement. Thank you. I did put this in the form of a letter. I don't know, can I submit the letter, or should I just give it to you, Julie?
Yeah, give it to me and I'll keep it as part of the record.
All right, thank you.
Aye. All right, so I guess you're here as an objector?
Yes.
01? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mary Krugman. I'm a 40-year resident of Montclair and a preservation specialist by my day job. And the thing that I'm passing around is the National Register nomination for the museum, and also illustrations from St. Luke Place, which is also identified in the master plan.
Can I get a copy of that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry that it will come around. Sorry. Here. So, as you know, the Montclair Art Museum is listed on the National and State Registers of Historic Places as part of the Arts Colony. It's also identified in the master plan, as is the National Register eligible St. Luke's Place streetscape, and including two of the most significant buildings on that street that look directly out onto the parking lot on the east side of the museum grounds. Under 4055D2, the purposes of zoning include promoting a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement, and even more importantly in this case, to promote conservation of historic sites and districts, open space, and to prevent degradation of the environment through improper use of land. So the museum itself, when it was built, it is itself an art object sitting in the landscape. And the landscape around it makes it a kind of temple on the hill. That's how it was conceived in its original architecture, and that is what the landscape reflects, and always has reflected. Even the addition that was recently done has enhanced the building itself, and it has still allowed the perception of the hill falling away from the facade of the museum to remain intact. On the other side, except for the tree line, there was a wonderful bank that falls down away from the museum, and that side of the museum actually is quite remarkable in its delicacy, and the window surrounds are very interesting to see. And the landscape really enhances that whole idea of a temple on the hill. It's called the jewel of the suburbs for a very good reason, and that's because it's really remarkable composition. On the other hand, this landscape is one of the few open places that are left green in the downtown area. There has been so much. I live 2 blocks from this museum and have been the beneficiary of art classes there. But I have to say that the grounds are very peaceful, and the building itself is symmetrical and peaceful, and it's a wonderful composition. If you go downtown, there's traffic, there's very dense development over the last 10 years particularly, and we are shell-shocked in the downtown area, in the South End area. We have too much going on and not enough green space. And so the loss of this intimate, naturalized landscape is particularly hard felt among many of us. And also the concrete wall and the flat plaza gouged out of the hillside and the removal of the trees and the creation of a flat, open landscape with a wall that my 12-year-old sons would take as a personal challenge to climb. This encroaches on the building itself. It's a hardscape that is too close to the building and has too much concrete, too many rectilinear lines, and it diminishes the beauty that the art museum has as a temple in a landscape. So the proposed design of the water wall, while it may be interesting to think of, is really not compatible with the grounds and the art museum as an art object of its own. And there is no dialogue between the water wall structure and the museum. There is, we always talk in preservation about dialogues that buildings have with one another. How do you respond one building to the other? And this is a shouting match, and the water wall wins because it's so square and so open, and you cannot appreciate the museum in the same way with that there. So I ask you that a green space like this should be preserved from development, and it should remain as an open, naturalized place where people can gather their natural sustenance and not encourage the structure of the water wall. Thank you.
Adrienne O'Toole, 48 South Willow. I really wasn't going to come. I was sitting down watching this at home on the TV, but it didn't come through too well. And I totally agree with everything Mary has said. I live on South Willow and Union, and I have a 7-story building going up, and well, you know the area. I wish you would start planning as a planning board should. We've had mistakes that can't be changed, dates that can't be corrected. Maybe the plan sounds nice, but I totally agree with Mary. We don't have enough green space, and it's being dissolved.
Hello, I'm Lisanne Renner, 42 Godfrey Road. I believe that the Sunval sculpture is not a sculpture that should just be moved around like a painting is moved around in a gallery over time. And that's for at least 4 reasons, which I'd like to explain. Number one is Herman Atkins McNeil's sculpture is an exterior component of the museum's architecture. It's bonded both architecturally and aesthetically to the museum's building. It's not a standalone piece of sculpture. It's connected. It has a dialogue with the building. The architect of the museum, Albert Ross, intentionally placed the Sunval in front of the building, sitting dead center with the central entrance. The sculpture has a design relationship with the museum's facade, which has been reinforced for over 100 years. This was the architect's vision for the site. That vision, which is for an ensemble of buildings and grounds tied together, is now on the National Register of Historic Places, as you know, and is therefore part of a protected cultural landscape. The second reason is that the Sunval was the pride and joy of the museum's co-founder, William T. Evans, who donated the sculpture to the museum. The sculpture was actually only the second piece of art to enter the museum's collection, so that's a pretty special place to be. And Evans intentionally wanted it to be placed on the grounds, as is mentioned in a 1913 catalog of the museum's holdings. And since then, that sculpture has become a character-defining element of this historic site. Evans wanted it in a highly prominent spot indicated by its current central placement where it's always been, and which he undoubtedly influenced. To disregard that wish, I think also disregards part of the institution's history. Number 3, before coming to the museum, the Sunval stood on the front lawn of Evans' home, which at the time was across from where the Mountainside Hospital is now, and it sat in his front yard from 1902 to 1913. He wanted it specifically mounted on a boulder, and he went searching for the perfect boulder, and he found one in Singac. And a 1902 newspaper account describes the significant event of moving that boulder. It was carted by a team of 12 horses from Singac to Evans's front lawn, where it stood with the Sunval on top of it until it was moved to the museum a decade later, when horses again carted both boulder and sculpture to the front of the museum property. The boulder element of the sculpture was clearly important to Evans, and its rustic character suggests the natural environment of the American wilderness and the Native Americans associated with it. The historic and aesthetic context of this would be erased if the Sunval were divorced from its boulder and relocated. The last reason I want to mention is that the sculpture is by an internationally recognized American artist. Its placement by the front door was emblematic of the quality of the art inside, and also a nod to the Native American collection, which makes this museum so special. There are several other castings of this award-winning sculpture in museums around the country. There's one at the Met, there's one at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, and at the Chicago Institute of Art. It won a silver medal in a Paris exhibition in 1900. For Montclair, the Sunval is, as the museum's director has called it, a historic gem. This gem is also part of a National Register site, and as such, the museum has a responsibility to be a steward of its historic site and balance its history with its artistic vision. So I would just like to say, let's not take the Sunval off its pedestal and sever it from its setting that both its architect and its donor envisioned. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gail Stavitsky, Chief Curator of the Montclair Art Museum, and I've also been a resident of Montclair for 25 years, so at the museum, so I'm a person who's actually been at the museum for the longest time and been able to see the dynamic growth of the institution as we have incorporated contemporary art into our program, the work of Spencer Finch on the facade of the museum, monitors on the ground. So there have been a lot of interesting changes which befits a dynamic, changing institution like the Montclair Art Museum, celebrating over 100 years. So the Art Park really presents a lot of exciting opportunities, and I think this whole process has been really interesting to generate, how the dialogue has been generated in the community, to hear the different viewpoints. I think that the museum very respectfully has entertained those different ideas. It is really the responsibility, the professional responsibility of the museum's Board of Trustees, working with the professional staff to make the determinations about the locations of the sculptures, all of which, in terms of the gifts of these works and acquisitions, they're really all unrestricted in nature. And I thought it would be interesting and important to share the fact that that is also true with this deed of gift by William T. Evans. He was one of the co-founders of the museum, so he always envisioned this dynamic role. And in his deed of gift from 1915, he said that the 54 paintings and 2 sculptures that he donated were to be used by the Montclair Art Association, this private association that founded the museum. The museum was not founded by the town, but the Montclair Art Association. And so that the works of art are to be used, to be presented to the Montclair Art Museum and its successors as well. So that means us as the future generation, that we would determine the appropriate uses and purposes for these works of art, including the sun vow on our grounds. So I think I should also just add that the museum trustees and the staff, I mean, no decisions have been made about the sun vow or any of the works on the grounds, but I think just reserving the right and freedom and responsibility to make these kinds of aesthetic decisions and decisions that will engage our community in a positive way. Thank you.
Good evening. Adam Grace, 42 Godfrey Road. Of course, in addition to being an art museum, the museum is the owner of property that is on the National Register and is listed as historic in the town's master plan. And I start with that because I can imagine that there could well be some anxiety on the board about making a decision that could have an impact on art. But the planning board does have the right to protect the building and its grounds. There is no artistic license exemption from normal board review. And the question tonight is not about preservation of art, it's about preservation of architecture. The board's power to prevent negative impact on a historic site applies not just to the building itself, but to the parcel. There's nothing controversial about that in preservation law. You can't fully protect a historic building without being sensitive to its setting. I'm not here tonight to speak out against modern art. I don't think the museum should be encased in amber. I'm here only because the proposed site plan seeks to alter a significant exterior feature of the building's original design. And this is a very narrow preservation law issue based on the fact that the sunvow sculpture installation is partnered with the building. It is not just that the sunvow is one of the museum's initial works of art. It isn't just that the sculpture matches the building's time period. This particular sculpture is unquestionably an integral part of the setting of the building in 1914. And the record before you showed that at the last hearing in the 1913 rendering by the architect of what the museum would look like. So it is true that the artist didn't choose the building, but the building chose this sculpture. The architect and the founders chose this. And that's why the sunvow was placed right at the door, and that's why it still stands there a century later, having become, as the director correctly stated, an iconic work for the museum. The museum, of course, is free to grace other parts of the lawn with whatever sculptures it wants. There's nothing stopping them from creating a new iconic work somewhere else on the property. But the pairing of the sunvow with the building is a part of the building's history, and whoever is in charge of the museum at any one moment of time should not be allowed to uncouple the two. The question is not whether a modern sculpture can be added to the property, but whether you should allow a property owner to remove the one and only original historic exterior work of art from the place where it was clearly intended to be. And I know that pointing back to the 1913 rendering is backwards looking, but all preservation is backwards looking, and that's why the town has appointed you to enforce our historic preservation ordinance, because preservation does not impede progress. It enhances the future by keeping alive the best examples from our history. As the museum director mentioned, founder William Evans gifted many paintings to the community. The museum can absolutely decide whether or not it wants to display them. The museum is the sole steward of those works. But the sunvow's public placement in front of this building does make it different. This work of art has two stewards, the museum board and the planning board. To the museum board, I ask you to reconsider your role in protecting the museum's history. I ask you to consider what it means to have a silver medal winning sculpture from the famed Paris 1900 exhibit at your doors as a symbol of the museum's founding and quality. How many museums can say that? And how many wish they could? To the planning board, whose mission includes protecting the historic building and grounds, I ask you to consider your role as the co-steward of the sunvow. I hope you will not approve the proposed site plan amendment and variance unless the sunvow stays put. Thank you.
Can I just ask you a question? Did you say that the sunvow was given first, existed first, and the building was kind of built around it? Am I correct in thinking that
I didn't
way?
say that, but I believe that is factually accurate, that it was first deeded, and then when the building was created, it shows up in the 1913 rendering.
Is that the only reason why you believe that that's the fact? The fact that it's in the rendering, is that your only basis for drawing that conclusion, that the building was built with the sculpture in mind?
No, the other fact is that the sculpture was placed there from inception.
So those-
And has stood there for over 100 years. So not only was it in the rendering, but that rendering actually was brought to life with the sunvow sculpture there as had been planned in 1913.
Mhm.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Kane Levy, and I'm on the Montclair Historic Preservation Commission. We made some recommendations, and the commission did vote to approve the site plan for this proposed alteration. With one element, the members of the commission were mixed on, and that was the relocation of the sunvow. The chair at the time, Kathleen Bennett, was not at the hearing, and she couldn't be here tonight, but she did want me to speak a little bit to why there was a mixed opinion about the relocation of the sunvow.
Can I just for clarification purposes, are you speaking on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission?
Yes.
Okay, to explain the board's or the commission's?
The commission's decision.
Okay.
So I think we were all persuaded. The applicant made a very good case for the need, the condition of the landscape needing some sort of renovation, that the plantings were beyond their life, and the commission was comfortable with the proposal as shown here. But it came up regarding the sunvow that, and I'll read something that Kathleen and I discussed. The National Park Service defines a cultural landscape as a historically significant property that shows evidence of human interaction with the physical environment. The placement of the sunvow from the very beginning at the front facade of the building, where the building serves as a kind of stage set, a temple for the arts, and the fact that one of the founders of the museum gave it from his personal collection demonstrates human interaction with the environment. The siting of the piece facing west towards the setting sun carries the message that the elder is serving as a mentor to the youth, a message which is relevant today as it was when it was first positioned. It serves as a vital link between the founding members' desire to create the first art museum in the state and the institution it has evolved into. The sculpture has coexisted within the shadow of contemporary art pieces for many years. The preservation of the sunvow in its historic location would in no way prevent the creation of a dynamic sculpture garden, an art park, which would carry the institution into the future.
Excuse me for one second. You're finished? I didn't want to interrupt you, but what were you reading from?
Something that Kathleen Bennett and I discussed.
Chairman, I mean, first of all, she's supposed to be speaking on behalf of the commission, which had a split decision, and now she's reading something that's not something it's not her testimony, it's from a member of the commission. And the commission's decision speaks for itself. There was a split
decision.
And Ms. Bennett, I guess, agreed with one side, and other people agree with the other side.
And I agreed. I was one of the people on the commission that also.
You indicated that you were representing the commission, yet it seems to me that you're representing your personal view of this issue and Ms. Bennett's personal view.
We're explaining the split decision on the relocation.
Are you going to explain the other side of that issue?
The other side of the issue was that some of the other commissioners believe that the art museum had the right to display their collection.
But Ms. Levy, just to clarify, Ms. Bennett was not part of that discussion.
She wasn't at the time.
So her letter is really not relevant to the discussion the night that the HPC voted on this application.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I'm just trying to understand
Okay. So
the letter that you're reading.
It's testimony that, should I?
The letter is hearsay, and it shouldn't be.
It's something I
not
agree
here.
with as well.
It's evidence.
Well,
Defendant is not here.
I think at best what we're hearing is a comment from a member of the Historic Preservation Committee. You've indicated that you, while the letter was written by Ms. Bennett, that you agree with what's in it.
I agree with it.
So this is basically an expression of your opinion and your view as a comment. It's not testimony. It is not the official position of the Historic Preservation Commission, because that would have come to the board in the form of a report.
Right.
And we have received a report from the Historic Preservation Committee, and this is your opinion.
This was the
and Ms.
dissenting
Bennett's
opinion.
opinion, but basically it's your opinion as you're
agree.
presenting it to us this evening as to what you feel was the schism between the members of the Historic Preservation Committee on the issue of the sculpture.
That's correct.
And Mr. Tremulak, would you agree that that's basically, at best, that this is what this is?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're clear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Frank Godlewski, Essex Fells. I kindly asked if there could possibly be a compromise, because I do feel that the museum, for their development, should be allowed to develop the side of the museum, because it is a site that historically there was a house on it that was demolished. It's not really part of the historic cultural landscape that characterizes the Montclair Art Museum and makes it a landmark. I do feel, however, that the front of the museum does, and I respectfully disagree with the curator in that the sculpture in front of the museum is part of the collection. To me, it's more like a symbol. It's more than a sculpture. It's a time capsule that we have in front of us that allows us to have a connection with the time of the founding of the museum. And that is also very important to Montclair and its origins in planning, because the same committee, the Municipal Arts Committee, that founded the Art Museum, is also the same committee that engaged John Nolan to do the Nolan Report, and that was the first master plan of Montclair. And it also became legislation for all master plans in the United States. So that's very significant in American history, not only Montclair history. And I feel that the statue, I mean, some can say that it's a statue. Some could say that there are better statues, and it's not only, it's not a unique piece. Some can say that it's racist. I don't feel that way. I feel that it's more than a statue. It's a symbol of the desire of the founders, and it's the museum's time capsule and what connects us, allows us to connect to the museum that point of time as a learning tool. Thank you.
I am Frank Walter. I am the president of the museum, and I've been a trustee for over 20 years. And we did not want to address what Frank just alluded to. He said that statue by some can be viewed as racist. It is a symbol, but it's a stylized, romanticized symbol of a mythical American Indian. It was obviously formed by an artist 100 years ago. It is the wrong symbol to be in front of the museum at this time. It was iconic for the museum, but the trustees, the 45 trustees who are responsible for the museum, feel it's important that it be removed from the front. We believe it should be relocated and not be iconic for the next century for the museum. And we've worked very hard over the last 20 years to open up the museum and to make it a part of the community. So we feel strongly that, in fact, that responsibility belongs with the trustees and the curators, and that it should be relocated and more appropriately positioned and explained. Thank you.
Okay, well, this isn't a debate, all right? This was your comment on the application, all right? And I don't want to set a precedent by giving people the opportunity to get the mic 2 and 3 times. If you're getting up to respond to what he said, I'm not going to permit that. If I assume that when you got up here the first time, that you told us everything that you wanted us to hear. And so, am I right? You're just trying to respond to what he just said, right? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, then I'm not gonna permit that. But that's neither here nor there. This isn't going to be a debate, a beck and call, you say something and you get a chance to respond. This is your comment on the application, all right? And we all realize that there are people who will agree and won't agree on that. I'm assuming that you're standing there because you won't agree to it, but I'm not going to let you take more time to put that disagreement on the record. We understand. There's just 2 sides to all these stories.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Stephen Plofker, 16 Irwin Park Road, Montclair, New Jersey. I'm a trustee in the museum. I've worked on this plan, and I'm not going to get involved in the sunvow sculpture and the merits of that. My favorite thing about the plan is that it takes a fairly unused landscape and makes it a landscape that's very inclusive. I mean, the museum has had a reputation, I think, through the years of being a more elitist institution, and it's an attempt to create very user-friendly grounds, flattened areas, sitting areas, areas for kids to play, and what is now almost a landscape, but not a useful landscape. It's hilly, rocky. It's broken up by different things, and I think that the museum, whether you approve it, the plan or not, should be applauded for trying to really make it a community space. And I think that if the board approves it, it will end up being a very utilized community landscape. So I hope the board will consider that in its deliberations. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Tremula.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for your time considering this application. So again, the relief that's being sought here is site plan approval with 1 variance, or again, it might be 2 depending upon your interpretation of the retaining wall. But this application complies with every requirement of the Montclair zoning ordinance, every requirement of the site plan ordinance. No variances are sought except for retaining walls. No site plan waivers are sought. It's a fully conforming site plan application with the 1 variance for the retaining wall height. I haven't heard anyone speak against the application because of the height of the retaining walls. And I think it's fairly obvious, based upon the testimony you heard from Mr. Anderson, that that the variance can easily be granted under Section C2, in that the benefits substantially outweigh any detriments. First of all, with respect to detriments to the retaining wall height, there really are none. The height limitation, I think, is an aesthetic or visual concern of the zoning ordinance, legitimately so. But these retaining walls are located in the interior of the property, which is a large property, 3.7 acres in size. They're not visible at all from Bloomfield Avenue, not visible at all from South Mountain Avenue. And somewhat visible from St. Luke's Place, but a substantial distance from St. Luke's Place to the retaining wall or the water wall. So given that location, given the size of the property, there really isn't any detriment to surrounding property owners of any kind. On the other hand, there are lots of benefits to be realized from this application. This, we believe, creates a substantial desirable improvement in visual impact for the community. It substantially increases and provides better accessibility for visitors to the museum, particularly handicapped individuals who right now are really not able to utilize or access the feature in front of the building. It also, I think, expands the museum's footprint by creating, as Mr. Plofker just said, much more usable outdoor space that can be used, to display art. I think there's an intention to provide more sculptures and other artwork in this now flattened, more usable location. Also provides a gathering place for the community and accessible for all members of the community, including those with handicap. The plan also provides, and this, I have trouble understanding Mary Krugman's concern about the loss of green space. There might be some green space that's being eliminated due to the pathways and walkways. However, a substantial amount of green space is being retained, and it's also going to be usable because it'll be leveled out, flattened, and used for the reasons I just mentioned, and maintain a substantial amount of green space. And in addition to that, the museum will be planting 82 new trees and I believe 76 new shrubs, a total of 158 new plantings to be added to this location. There's also going to be improvements in lighting, which provides not only aesthetic benefits but safety benefits. So all of those benefits of this project clearly outweigh any detriments, if there are any, relating to the height of the retaining walls. I think we heard testimony from the Historic Preservation Commission member. For talking about the historic preservation, I think it's important to note, I think this was mentioned earlier in the testimony, but one of the board members, commission members, characterized this project as a gift to the community, and that's exactly what it is. This project provides major improvements to one of Montclair's most important institutions, and particularly in a town that prides itself on arts, culture, and entertainment. I dare say this is the most important institution in the town of Montclair. And with respect to the concerns regarding the Sunbow sculpture, I mean, everyone can have a different point of view on that, and I respect the point of view of the people who would like to preserve that. But other people have no problem with the statue being removed and relocated. There was a split of opinion among the Historic Preservation Commission members. But regardless of where you fall on that opinion, respectfully, it's not for this board to determine that issue. This is a decision that is for the Board of Trustees of the museum. They are the stewards of this institution for this community. Most of those trustees reside in Montclair, and I think this board has to defer to the artistic judgment of the Board of Trustees with respect to relocating this statue. And again, it's going to be relocated. It's not put in another location where it will remain visible and perhaps more visible or more accessible than its current location. And just dealing with that issue, This property, yes, it's on the historic, the National Register of Historic Places. However, what's most important is it is not an historic landmark under the Montclair zoning ordinance, which means that the board really has no right to require that the statute remain in its location. I think, Martin Schwartz said that, I don't always agree with Martin Schwartz, but I think he was correct when he stated at the last meeting that, in his view, the planning board should not get involved in micromanaging the museum's artistic vision for the community. That's for the museum and its trustees, who are the stewards of this wonderful institution that we have in Montclair. And I think this board has to defer to their judgment on this issue. In all other respects, the application, as I said, with the exception of the one variance for retaining wall height, which is easily justified, in all other respects, this is a fully conforming application, and I think it's worthy of the board's approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tremolak. Can you turn that microphone off? No, the portable, the handheld one? Yeah, that's driving me crazy.
Well, I wish you had told me sooner.
I kept forgetting when there was a break, and I didn't want to interrupt people. All right. I never thought I would hear you, Mr. Tremolak, quote Martin Schwartz.
Neither did I.
That in and of itself.
Well,
With respect to the statute, let's talk about that first. Okay. Does our ordinance, does the MLUL give us jurisdiction, give us any right to dictate, to say anything about the location of a particular piece of art on this property in connection with this application? Art.
So the MLUL Section 2 says that it is the intent and purpose of this act to promote a desirable visual element through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement, end quote. That is the view of the MLUL. To answer your question that you've asked me, I don't think there's any provision or anything in the MLUL that reaches down to the location of specific items in the site plan.
I think the site plan, as it's submitted, calls for a sculpture to be in the center of the circle. Now, there's been discussion. The proposal didn't have the sculpture that's there now. It had proposed something else. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be any sculpture in front. There's going to be a place for a sculpture, and it could very well be, even if it's removed, it could very well be relocated back there at some date in the future. My point is that the possibility of the sculpture being in front of the building, if that is an important factor for people, is not necessarily foreclosed. But I think more importantly is that I agree with the view from the artists that this museum is supposed to be something dynamic. This sculpture, when I look at even the National Register nomination, doesn't talk about the sculpture. The sculpture is a piece of artwork. It talks about the building. It talks about the grounds. The grounds is not the sculpture. The sculpture was in front of Mr. Evans' house. It was relocated to the art museum. It was gifted to the art museum, just as the other works of art were gifted to the art museum. And I really think it's up to the trustees to determine how they want to deploy the art on the site, and they're not proposing to get rid of it. Even more so, they're just proposing to locate it, someplace else. And even if they did propose to take it out of the public view, I still can't see, other than conjecture about what somebody may have thought back in the early 1900s, I still can't see where it's going to interfere with the integrity of the piece of art. I mean, the art won the silver medal in Paris. It didn't have the building as its backdrop. It was judged independently, and the copies of it are placed, in other galleries around the country that we've heard about. Well, the building is not with the artwork. The artwork, I think, stands on its own, and I don't think that it's within our purview. So enough about the artwork. I agree with Mr. Tremulak. I don't get the objection about green space because this is an enhancement of the green space. It's not an elimination of green space. And I think, sometimes when you're enhancing something, you may need to limit it and prune it and reshape it. But I mean, I think this is going to be a more useful green space than what's there now because it's going to be much more accessible to a wider range of people, as opposed to, a hillside that will restrict certain people who are elderly and handicapped who would not be able to, ordinarily use it. I think the plan is an enhancement of the property. I don't think when the art museum was built that they envisioned it looking like it does today with its additions and its parking lots and such. But it does, and I agree that it needs to be a dynamic place. And I see this application as promoting that dynamic feature, and I don't see there really being a detriment because of the location and the nature, I mean, of this development, if you want to call it a development. I don't really see it as having a negative impact upon the surrounding. I see it as having a positive impact. So, and for that reason, I would vote to approve the application.
I can make a couple quick comments. I think it's a really good plan. Thank you for adding the changes to the fencing. It's really good. I regret no green infrastructure, but we can't require it. But maybe next time, if the Development Review Committee commits to it early. I was kind of curious about the drainage issues on the neighboring property, but having said that, I think we might have missed something, and Ms. Krugman, or whoever spoke, the material of the wall. I don't think we received, and I apologize if we received it. Have we received what the wall is made of? And on the plans, on the sheet, it says granite or limestone. So what I would request is, if we do approve this, that there's some follow-on to make sure that the wall material is compatible with the museum itself. I'm not sure if we saw that.
Other than what's indicated on the specs.
It says limestone or granite, as far as I can tell.
Right. Go ahead.
I did think testimony said it was granite. The water part would be granite.
What's been submitted says or, limestone or granite. Well, I guess what I'm talking about is whatever stone it is, color, whoever can say, yeah, it looks good and it's compatible, that's all.
So we should get some clarification on that.
I don't think we have an objection if the board wants to defer the issue and have the applicant meet with a subcommittee to review materials and the like. I think the museum is okay with that.
Well, I would like to propose that that we approve the application with conditions. And there aren't too many, other than our standard conditions. And Art, you want to run through what you have?
I don't have. We did speak last time, as well as tonight, about a review of the finishes and to ensure that there be high-quality materials. I think that was certainly a discussion.
And then we can add the wall and the materials of the wall, certainly within the ambit of that review.
Okay, and I think that's pretty much all I have in terms of my conditions that the board has imposed.
And the plantings, I think Keith was satisfied with the...
Well, I have a question about that.
Plantings.
I think the original Arboretum was meant to display plantings from all over the world, and why we would stick to native New Jersey plants, I think is very limiting, and why not, let them plant what they want, instead of just sticking to this native New Jersey stuff.
I think that the idea behind our general request is because of our weather and climate
I understand
and
that, yeah.
being able to hold up.
Right, but I think
because
they would
once-
be able to select things that would match our climate and weather and all that.
Right, but once it leaves this board,
Yeah,
we lose any control, and so we like to make sure that things would last while it's before us, because if it doesn't, then we don't get another crack at it, and if it isn't maintained, then there's nothing that we can do about it. You know, if it's something that goes away or that dies within the next year, you know, that because of the weather or because it's not suited for this area.
right, but I'm sure their landscape architect would take that into consideration. I just think in compliance with the original intent of this, I guess it was pretty original anyway, it may not be exactly when it was built, but over time it became an arboretum with a wide variety of plants from all over the world, and I think it would be nice to at least keep that thought when they do have new plantings, instead of going with this native New Jersey stuff. I think it's just limiting. But that's just my POV.
Well, on that point, I mean, is that what the museum wants? They want to extend, I mean, I don't know if that's an intention or,
Well,
is that?
I wasn't here, but Mr. Sionis did the landscape plan, and I think, you know, I'm not looking to call
Mr.
him up
Sionis,
again, but,
can you come up?
you know, I've been to numerous meetings when has continuously insisted that native species, and I think that's probably what Paul had in
I
mind.
think he's expressing the.
But this is a different site. It's a site that originally had a wide variety of plantings, and I
Right, which
feel
is
like we should stick.
no longer the right thing to do. I mean-
You
Mr.
don't think it's
Sionis, you
right?
recognize you still are
Still no,
under
I
it.
do. Right.
You agree that we should stick just to New Jersey plantings?
The recommendation is to use plants that are native to northern New Jersey. It's better for wildlife attraction, less use of water, and they acclimate better to the site. We've discussed this in the past. I love certain trees from other areas, but the correct thing to do is native plants.
Okay, no ginkgo trees then.
Favorite tree.
Let me ask you a question. Since there is, this is a soothing area with water, and
Yes.
it's a very calming area, would you consider putting in a pollinator garden nearby
Yeah.
that attracts butterflies and bees? And
The landscape plan did change it quite a bit, or not quite a bit, but the area with the art park has a lot of pollinators on the plan now.
Oh, that's good.
So
Okay.
all of a lot of perennials.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of comments. I was kind of distressed that the trustees apparently didn't consult with historic preservation people when you did this plan. That was the testimony that was given. And I just feel that kind of lets the town down when it doesn't take into account the point of view of experts in this field, since this is on the National Historic Register, for the record.
Well, we have a motion.
I have another. I was wondering if you, I mean, I had made the suggestion that the museum go to their property insurance safety people and have this whole wall thing looked at by them. And I still, there's a lot of expertise from your insurance carriers, and I really believe that would be a wonderful thing for you guys to do, to make sure that this is perfectly safe, since you're attracting children to this area. And I think that's something you might want to do, and I'm just reiterating that point.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
And good luck with your staff
Yes.
discussion, which I'm sure will continue.
Okay, board members, I do have an additional work item that I submitted to you tonight. It's not on the agenda, but this proposed resolution came about in response to our last meeting on 37 Orange Road and the discussion about renewable energy RECs, renewable energy, I forgot what the last, So the suggestion was to bring in a sustainability expert who could advise the board on the proposal from the developer. And we've used a sustainability expert in the past, which is Designs for Life. So I reached out to him and asked him about his experience with solar power and solar energy options. And he does have experience in that and submitted a proposal. So if the board would like to retain him to work with, to respond to the sustainability issues for that application, we
What
certainly can.
application? I'm sorry, Janice.
It's the 37 Orange Road application.
One
which-
next to the hotel.
The one that you're, I don't think.
Oh, no, yeah, okay.
Yeah, the one next to the hotel.
Sorry, thanks.
You weren't there for
I'm
that.
not on it, yeah.
You're not on that. So, if this sounds good to you, if you could,
Yeah, I'd like to move that we do retain the expert.
is there a
And-
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
So that person they would verify also that the correct, that they've calculated is correct.
Exactly.
Because we have to
And
look at
possibly also if there are other configurations or other
Right.
alternatives.
We could do both, do a little bit of both.
Just, so I've reached out to the applicant and said, give us something in writing, because it was really all in testimony.
Right.
So that we can have him review it and advise the board.
Right.
Okay?
Then we can get a better handle
Yeah.
on what to do with that issue.
Right. Okay?
All right.
And then we have bills. Is there a motion to pay the bills? Okay,
Second.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. But this is
pretty good meeting.
This is a battle between historic preservation and art, all right? And I don't see.
What about the rock? That sitting on the rock?
No.